welcome to our amazing panel. Thank you so much for being here. So we've entered the age of super content, where everyone is a creator and everything is content. However, turning that influence into a brand of scale, fueled by an authentic community, is a totally unique skill set. So we have a group here that is totally skilled at doing that, and I think we have a great conversation planned for you. So let's kick off. Armaan, let's start with you. At Odore, you provide beauty brands primarily here in the US with a suite of tools and resources to help them build community and advocacy. To set the stage for our discussion, I'd like to start with the evolution of influence and community in the beauty industry. How has beauty moved from an age-old celebrity endorsement and influencer marketing that sort of came from 2010 to sort of where we are today?
Yeah, well, first, thanks so much for having us.
Of course.
It's a real pleasure to be here and sharing the stage with such incredible founders. Yeah, so when we look at and evaluate brand longevity, we see that the fundamentals haven't changed. So the brands that last over time are the ones that deliver true value, the ones that deliver great products, and that's really reassuring. But I think what has really evolved is the way that these brands are promoting themselves. So historically, where maybe the beauty industry was more of like a pay-to-play model, where you had to rely on like celebrity endorsements or high marketing budgets to reach those audiences, which of course made a lot of these brands with those authentic voices be overshadowed by the ones that spend millions on promotions. So that's like an evolution that we see. And I think like authenticity today, it matters more than it did before. Of course, when you look at like TikTok and the algorithms, how they're prioritizing engagement over people, and they prioritize engagement with people that have, regardless of what followers they have. So I think that's really reassuring for a lot of this space. Last night I was actually sitting with Gary from Danessa, and I was really moved by what he said about how he gets emotional every time Danessa shares a story. And I think that passion really resonates with consumers, and today brands have that opportunity to really share those authentic voices, build a community, and then amplify their message. So I think it's a really interesting time.
Yeah, for sure. Deepica and Mona, Armaan mentioned the importance of authenticity in building connections in today's beauty community. Deepica, let's start with you. Live Tinted started as a movement before it became a brand. Tell us about that, and how did you nurture that transition and doing it authentically?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so I actually had a built-in audience as an influencer, and I was like trying to figure out I wanted to build a beauty brand since I was 16 years old, and a lot of investors told me you should just launch the product, see what happens, and then take it from there. But it was really important to me that I created a brand that was around a community and like a shared ideology of feeling left out of the beauty industry. And so I started Live Tinted as this movement and this idea of connecting people who hadn't seen themselves represented in beauty. And we talked about things that I didn't see even editorial magazines talking about, like colorism and avoiding the sun and bleach creams. And so those conversations, I think, just really connected people from all different backgrounds. And then it was really natural. I just asked them, like, what do you feel like is missing from the beauty industry? And everyone said, I need a solution for dark circles. And so I had a viral video 5 years before that where I used red lipstick under my eyes to mask dark circles. And then 5 years later, there's still people telling me in my community that they didn't see a solution. So I created it. And our very first product, the Hue Stick, won Allure Best of Beauty and is still one of our best sellers.
And remind us, your platform back then was YouTube, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. So I started, one viral video changed my life in 2015. It was my second video I ever posted. Filmed it on my iPhone. Like, talk about authentic, right? I had no idea what I was doing.
I mean, that's it, right? Like, that is the authenticity story. Like, I remember in it's sort of like 2015, 2016 timeframe, everyone was like hosting, like here at Spring Studios, they were like filming their Instagram content in like a studio environment. And now it's all about that like super authentic, like super raw connection. Speaking of that, Mona, welcome. You've built such a strong brand with such a personal presence to it. But in the beginning, it didn't resonate well. Tell us what changed and how you were able to scale without losing that personal touch.
Well, to be honest, I think, as a founder and as an entrepreneur, of course, you go through such an evolution. And when I first launched KAYALI, it had been something that I had been dreaming about for so many years. I had my first perfume samples from 2010, but I just kept putting it on the back burner. We launched Huda Beauty, my sisters and I together, and then I had some experience with launching color through social and content. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do the same thing with KAYALI. We're going to launch a fragrance brand, and we're going to sell it with like pretty selfies and like lifestyle pictures. And I thought that would help us succeed, but of course it didn't. Fragrances are extremely emotional, and you really have to share a story and walk people through a journey and have them envision what they're going to feel through your product. So I did go through my own evolution, my therapy journey, which I talk about a lot because I think everybody should be doing therapy. Working on yourself and getting to know who you are and your why is so important. So once I started doing that, I feel like I unlocked a lot of expression and communication. I also did chakra unblocking, so my communication chakra, my throat chakra. And yeah, the brand just started to really take off. Of course, I have an amazing team, and we worked together. I finally got a content team, and that was really transformational. But I think, just starting with my why, starting with expressing myself and using content as a platform to walk people through a picture. And I don't think that was really done much before, with the exception of selling sex. That was the only way people used to sell fragrances. It was like, hot guy, hot girl, let's make them look like they're attracted to each other, we're going to sell that. And when you start to look into who you are and the spectrum of emotions that we all have, you have so many emotions, and they're all very important. So we sell happiness, we sell excitement, we sell passion, energy, all the wide spectrums of emotions that we have. So using content in an interesting way, and that was really what helped us take off. And of course, the content creator evolution in fragrance was a big game changer, which was coincidental from COVID. It changed a lot, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I asked the question not to call you out, but I asked because it's so
okay.
important that people hear that, your brand is so successful today.
Thank you.
It's really important that people hear that sometimes you have to experiment, and sometimes you have to pivot.
Never give up, and I'm sure, today, of course, we're doing well and everything, but tomorrow, that's never promised, and you always have to keep innovating, keep experimenting, keep thinking for the future, especially with content today. It changes so quickly. Like, by the time you wake up, it's already evolved. The algorithm evolves, so you just have to be so persistent and obsessed with your craft.
Yeah, for sure. Armaan, Deepica and Mona have so skillfully transitioned their brands, their audience, from being fans into being engaged brand advocates. Why do you think some brands are successful at this and others aren't?
Yeah, I think what's really inspiring about both Mona and Deepica is they've basically built the brand on the foundations of that community, and I think that connection resonates with the audiences. So for example, Deepica, as she mentioned, she didn't have a product line before. She created this movement where she basically had a movement of inclusive beauty and gave people voices that they didn't have before. And then when she did launch the product line, it was almost like the community was not just buying into products, but they felt that sense of ownership. And I think that drove a lot of advocacy. And the same with Mona. You've taken the storytelling approach where, as you mentioned, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of passion that deeply resonates with those audiences. So when people are buying KAYALI, they're not necessarily just buying a perfume, they're actually buying a part of that journey, and that becomes their story, and then that creates that advocacy. So I think what's really important is where brands actually build those connections, make it a lot more personable, whether that's through the founders or the team. And where we see it is, when you're creating those opportunities for your community members, you're spotlighting them, you're listening to them, creating these Q&A sessions, virtual masterclasses, and things like that. So I think that's really important to create that. And where the brands don't succeed is where you treat these community members almost like micro campaigns, and you put an ROI and a metric to everyone that's speaking about your brand. And I think that's maybe in the short term it could benefit you, but in the long run, to really build that true inclusive community, you do have to take that long-term approach.
Mona and Deepica, part of the authenticity challenge is really the sheer amount of content that is required. I call it feeding the content machine. How do you keep the machine fed, and how do you manage that at scale? Mona, let's start with you.
I would say this is definitely one of the hardest parts of the job, like content creation, coming up with interesting ideas. Of course, I have to start with my team. They're amazing. They're obsessed. I'm obsessed. I do consume a lot of content too, and I think that's important if your role does involve content. And even if it doesn't, you know, if you have a brand and you want to be in the know of what's happening, you need to be where your community is, and you need to be watching what they're watching and hear the feedback live. So I do watch a lot of content, and we shoot together on a weekly basis, sometimes twice a week, and we try our best. And I think there's no magic recipe, but you just have to keep trying, keep pushing, put it in your calendar, make sure it's there regularly, and yeah, just keep experimenting.
And I have to brag for a second, but I did have the opportunity, Kelly and I both had the opportunity to visit Mona in her office in Dubai, where you guys have the most incredible, like,
We have like a studio.
You
Yeah.
have like a beautiful fragrance library, which of course I've seen featured on on your platforms as well.
You have to set it up for creation. And actually, one of our offices, like one of the floors, was set up for creativity. I worked with a feng shui consultant, and I asked her, she asked me, she's like, what emotions do you want people to feel here? And I was like, well, it's my creative team working here. So I was like, love, safety, and creativity. So she's like, feminine energy. So she put feminine energy everywhere. We've got rose quartz, we've got curves, we've got textured walls. So it really feels like a cocooning safe space, which opens up your mind and makes you just start exploring and everything. So we have that, and then we have props. We have like very organized prop section, and we're just very obsessed. And together, we don't do it every week because it's been really busy lately, but we meet together and we have a group think session where everybody in our team, part of our marketing team and content team, we bring all our favorite things we saw on social, and we talk about it, we brainstorm together, how could we make this work with our brand? So I think just being very collaborative, being very open, and getting everybody thinking about content is really important.
Deepica, how about you? How are you feeding the content machine? And also, when am I coming to your office to hang out?
Yeah, come to LA. So everything she said, yes, but I agree that it is the hardest part of the job because there's no off switch. Like, you can be on your weekends thinking about, you could be on vacation and people want to see that even more sometimes. Like, they want to see your personal life. So I do find it's the hardest part of the job. It's like being the content creator and the CEO is two different parts of the brain. So creating days for filming, like she mentioned, has really helped me. It's like every Wednesday is the content day. And then I have like the meeting days. But I think experimentation is super important because it's literally changing in real time, like as we speak. And the TikTok algorithm is changing 24/7. And so having specific days for filming, but also being open to like a trending sound, and right after a board meeting being like, you got to go do this TikTok dance is like the reality of like Vanessa gets it. It's just it. You kind of have to accept it, but it works, you know?
Yeah.
Such a great point. I used to resist the dances, and they work. Yeah. They're like all the engagement. I'm like, I do these serious videos about like life and personal development. Nobody watches, but the dances are like everything.
Put all this time into this like storytelling of like the brand, and then it's this dance on the internet that takes off.
That's the one. That's always the one, right? Armaan, at Odore, speaking of dances and trends, at Odore, you're using AI to scan social platforms to shortlist creators for outreach, and also helping brands to spot trends. Tell us how that works and how it helps brands optimize their ROI.
Yeah, so I mean, we made a conscious decision when we built the platform not to create a community where creators have signed up to us and then brands can tap into just for UGC. What we are on the mission to do is help brands for the long term to help them build those relationships. So we invested a lot in tools that scans all public profiles across Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and then analyze like their content history, their preferences, their audience demographics, breakdowns, and then really value match them with the brands that we work with. And that's where we're seeing like the true results. Then on the trend setting side, we're seeing trends that are emerging and then potentially providing those recommendations to the brand as well. So they can be a lot more reactive when conversations are hot. They're able to kind of create content. And we also help them with the creators that are within the community, which are the ones that align with certain trends better, because there's no point encouraging creators to create content if they haven't done something before. So that's what that we do. But although I love talking about the technology, I think the most important thing with community is actually that human element, where the technology is able to kind of help you maintain that infrastructure and have thousands of creators to kind of moderate content, look at analytics and things like that. But we can't forget how important that human touch is. So that's something that we think is extremely valuable for every community to have, whether it's with us or like someone else.
Yeah, let's stay on the topic of trends for a second, and changes to the algorithm, frankly. How do you guys stay ahead of the curve? Deepica, let's start with you.
I'm going back to the team. It's like you're one person. You can't just sit there and constantly scroll on TikTok, although that is also a part of it. But Gen Z, we say what we say about them, but they are on it. And so hiring employees that know it better than you has been my solution, or I would go crazy on social media all day. So,
Mona, how about you? How do you stay ahead of the curve?
I also think Mona creates the curve.
I was just about to say I have a weird thing with the word trend. I actually hate it.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're following trends, then you're always behind. So in order to be leading the trend, or even your own curve, because we all have our own path we can follow, I think you just have to think differently and stay authentic to who you are, because the beauty of social media is that there truly is a tribe for everyone. Like everyone. Like if you're the type of person that is witty and funny and sarcastic, be that. You're gonna find a tribe and they're gonna love you for it. If you're, super cool and luxurious, do that. If you're really nerdy like me and a teddy bear, then be that. You just have to be who you are. And then you find your tribe, and then you create your own trends within that tribe, and that's all that matters, right? It's like you wanna be with the people who care about what you care about. Then you're gonna create an impact. If you're just resonating with everyone, you're not gonna make a difference.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that's part of the reason I can't sit and scroll too much, because it's like what worked was that I had an idea and I posted that idea, that went viral. That's why the product worked. So if I obsess too much, somebody else can do that obsession. I need to focus on being me.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what this panel is. This panel is authenticity at scale. So it's about finding your tribe, right? It's not just about talking to everyone. It's about finding those people that actually become part of your authentic brand community.
And I think going back to the therapy thing, I know I'm really annoying, but I just believe in it so much. I think in order to find your tribe, you also need to take time to know who you are. And I think not enough people understand themselves enough. And even if you do it for a while, you have to continue doing it because you evolve, you change. So know yourself, and then you can find others who also, feel the way you feel. So just take that time to get to know yourself.
Yeah.
Have that deep connection, with who you are.
I love that. Great advice. You guys, Deepica and Mona, you guys have moved from being brands that exist purely in the digital world to now existing in the physical world in store. How has that changed the way you engage with your communities? Deepica, let's start with you.
I don't generally think it does, but there's a lot more they're my people, so come support, and driving them into the retailer has been a big part of it, and creating experiences where you can meet them in real life in those retailers is a part of it. But the general voice is the same. You want to speak to them like they're your friends, they're your peers, because they are. They're the reason I have a business, and it started with that community and that soul behind it. So I feel like they're all rooting for me, which is the best feeling. My community and people want us to win, and every time I do a store meetup, there's 250 people waiting in line. It's just crazy to me. But yeah, I would just say the only difference for me is driving them into the stores rather than doing it digitally, and especially because complexion is the biggest part of our business, and so touching and feeling the product to get that shade is important. So that's been the biggest reason. Obviously, to go into a retailer, it's to scale.
Yeah.
But it's also that IRL, you get to touch the product and meet the customer in person. So it's been the best experience.
Yeah, I would say the same. I don't think we've really changed our strategy too much, because we were always speaking to our community globally, and then we also were in store in some markets, not in store in some others from the very beginning. But I think the pressure definitely increases. You want to make sure that they have a great experience. You're also increasing the size of your community through your retail partners. There's people who discover us through Sephora and other partners. So I think it just raises the bar, and you have to raise the bar for yourself. But I think it's definitely added so much value to be able to have our product in store too. With the fragrance, people do want to try it, but we have been very fortunate that people have built a lot of trust with us, and as a fragrance brand, on average, we have about 50% of our sales online, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
But we're really happy to start getting more space in store.
Did you? It looked like you might have something to add.
No.
Well, hold that thought. I have a question for you. So yeah, throughout the year, a brand engages with their community in so many different ways. So like, for example, if they're having like a new product launch, for example, they may do like a huge paid campaign. But at the end of the day, we're here talking about community. And so, an email list isn't a community, right? What are some of the tactics brands can use to convert their audience from sort of this top of funnel to engaged members of a community?
Yeah, I think you're right when you say like an email list is not a community. I think there's a distinction between an audience that passively consumes and then a community member that is like supporting you, contributing, and part of that tribe and things like that. What we see is like a lot of brands do this like progressive engagement, which kind of builds that relationship over time and not expecting like those immediate results. So for example, when you can identify why that member, like what sparked their interest in your brand, whether it was the product or something you did, you can then start to kind of provide those personalized values to them without really expecting anything in return first. And then over time, you can then build that meaningful contribution, whether it could be like small lift things like product testing, or even things around like collaborations that can happen over time. Once you do actually create that meaningful engagement within your community, then what we see a lot of brands doing is segmenting within that community. So you may have like certain community members that drive value in different ways. So some that's maybe great for creating content for a launch, some great for like detailed product feedback, some great for driving sales, whatever it may be. But I think ultimately it also comes down to like building those true connections. And it's not just about building a connection between like a brand and a member, but actually building connections between those members as well. Because like when you kind of put together a group of people that have those shared values, shared interests, then you really start to form those like strong bonds between people, and it makes your whole community quite sticky as well.
Let's stick with the content strategy for a second. Mona, your content is sort of this clever mix of meme style content that makes people laugh and product-based educational content. How do you find the right mix? Because both are important, right? One, as you said earlier, one sort of performs better than the other at times. But how do you find that mix?
To be honest, as a founder, I feel it's really important to create a mix that represents your personality. So that is my personality. I love to laugh. I love to make people laugh. That's the kind of content I like to consume as well. But then I'm also a big nerd, so I love being educated, and I love to geek out on details and information. So it really does come from myself, and I try to serve what I like to consume. So if I find it interesting, then I want to share it. But I think, again, you have to create something that really resonates with yourself, if it's your founder page, or the brand's values, if it's your brand page. So for us, we've always tried to keep it very dynamic. Of course, I know a lot of people always talk about edutainment, and I think that, again, I think a lot of people will resonate with edutainment because when you are educated or entertained, you're getting something back, and I feel like you're getting value from watching it. It's making you feel good. We're just watching just glossy photos and things that are too fine-tuned, too precious. I think it's a bit boring and exhausting sometimes. Sometimes it makes you feel bad actually watching it. So I think that the content evolution has shifted a lot from being that super manicured Instagram style content to now being very relatable, entertaining, educating. So we try to just stay real.
Yeah, and Deepica, one of the best ways to get people engaged is to sort of make them feel like they're part of the team. What role does co-creation for things like product development and feedback play in your content strategy? And can you share a few examples?
I think it's a balance. Like, the community definitely wants to sound off and be a part of the process, but they also are coming to you as the authority to tell them what they need and want. So it's this like interesting in between. I found that the most exciting thing for them is to be a part of the product development process. So we have people in our like actual customers that we send products to say, hey, what do you think about this new SPF that we're trying? And one of the things that we always talk about is having no white cast, and so sending it to people with different skin tones to make sure that it does work. So they're super engaged and feel like when the product does come out, they're like, I actually helped create this. Our very first campaign, where people from the community came to my garage and were the models in the campaign, which was great. And we're launching a complexion product in the fall, and we're doing the same thing. So it's like, you know, you talk about how do you keep it at scale, this community feeling. And I do feel like there was a few years in between when we were launching in our retailer. It's like there's a lot that goes into that I asked myself when 2025 started is like, how do we ensure that the community always feels seen? That's like what the whole brand why is. And so keeping that going at scale is, I think, critical.
Yeah, and you know, many brands struggle a little bit with community fatigue. So with all of this content that you guys are creating, at some point, you know, brands start to struggle with their community just feeling burnt out. How do you keep engagement fresh and avoid this sort of content burnout? Armaan, let's start with you.
Yeah, for us, I think, you know, it really comes down to a couple things. So one is, of course, you know, varying that kind of engagement content style, you know, not just kind of going after the same ones and like encouraging, say, get ready with me videos and so on. But I think the most important thing is actually listening to the feedback from the community and like understanding what types of like content, what types of engagements really resonating. Because I think a lot of brands that are successful also understand that they've reached where they are because of like that community that's got them there. So, you know, it's so valuable to listen to that and see like what's important. So yeah, for us, it's that community feedback. And then secondly is that freedom as well. You know, like as Mona said, like give your tribe that freedom as well to create their own trends and things like that. So I think that's really important. It's no longer just about like those strict briefs and things like that, but actually giving the freedom.
Mona, how about you?
I would say just making sure that you're always diversifying your content, and that's why, you know, for us, we always want to have that balance that you mentioned earlier, like funny content, entertaining, educating content, but always switching it up. So it's not like a great answer, so I'm sorry. There's no real equation that people can follow that it's like a magic recipe. There isn't one. You know, you always have to switch it up, and you can't keep doing the same thing repeatedly if you want people not to have that fatigue. You know, if you keep doing the same thing for every launch, for every single occasion, people are going to get bored. But as long as you're innovating, you're changing up your own, you know, content strategy all the time, then people will stay and they'll get entertained, and your community will grow, which will help with the fatigue, because then more people are in it, more people are engaging with each other, and you're building your community, and people make friends with each other. But it's not easy, and that's why, you know, when you mentioned the content question, it's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Because it never stays the same at all, and like Deepica mentioned, it's like when you wake up, it's different. So, sorry.
How do you keep it fresh?
I totally agree with everything she said, but I think that's kind of the magic of founder-led brands is that like we're dynamic, changing humans, so then the brand feels that energy also. And so when you're creatives, whatever's in our mind comes through into the content. And I see that with all my other founder brand friends, and it's like it'll never stay the same because we're not the same. And I think that's what keeps the brand interesting.
But you have to push yourself not to do the same thing. I think a lot of people just keep repeating the same thing just because.
Yeah.
Where you really cannot. Like every day, like write down your ideas. I do this a lot, and sometimes they're like in the shower. As soon as I get out of the shower, or sometimes I take my phone in the shower, which is really bad. But I'll write down an idea, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if people would be interested in that. And then, you know, you speak to your team, and they're like, actually, yeah, that would be cool.
I have like dreams about things, and then the next day I'm writing.
Yeah, like ideas. If you
stop.
start looking for ideas, they'll come to you, and just don't ever think anything's too weird. Yeah. You know, you never know.
Armaan, what are the dreams Deepica should be having in 2025? What are the platforms and trends that brands should be paying attention to this year for building community?
I only have 30 seconds, right?
No, keep it going. We'll find time for it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a couple of interesting ones. Like for TikTok is still that kind of discovery powerhouse, but we're seeing a big trend in YouTube. I think that long-form content seems to be coming back, especially in beauty. It gives creators more time to express the story and like their journey with the brand as well. So I think that's super interesting. I think the second trend is around how brands now are almost like flipping strategies. So it's no longer this like platform strategy is more around like that creator strategy. So rather than saying, I need X amount of EMV this quarter from TikTok or X amount of posts, you're giving creators that freedom to create content on platforms that they really shine on, and I think that's super interesting. Third is around like social commerce. TikTok Shop is something that we're really fascinated by, and we're going to be launching like an app. So I think a way, if you're able to like kind of seamlessly create that journey from content to purchase, I think that's really interesting. But I think most importantly is that relationship between like brands and influencers is not what it was many years ago. I think right now the expectations as well from creators is that they want to be part of like partners and part of that brand as well and be part of that journey. And it's, it's amazing to see a lot of brands are providing those opportunities, and I think that will like continue to grow as well.
Perfect. Well, we have about 3 minutes for questions, and I know everyone has questions. So we have a couple up here, a couple in the back.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Tara Wilson. I'm the founder of the Tara Wilson Agency. We create activations for sportswear and beauty brands. Deepica and Mona, this is for you. Can you share some of your best practices around evaluating your content metrics, and specifically like around the cadence of when you're evaluating those metrics and looking for success and changing it up?
Do you want to go first?
I just look at the numbers. If it goes viral, and oh no, not hourly. I would go hourly. Wow.
I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I think what's so cool, as much as the numbers and the algorithm is stressful, it also is very clear. Like, you can see what works and what doesn't work and what sticks. And so very quickly you can see, but sometimes like a week later, a reel will take off. That's the other interesting thing. So as a team, we do it monthly. We do like a monthly social review and look at all the metrics at like a high level, looking at the things that didn't perform too. I think that that's also important, because more important, honestly, because you don't want to be spending your time on things that aren't working, but we do it on a monthly basis.
yeah, we do weekly reports, and we also look at like what's performing best, our top post, our worst performing posts too. But I do check kind of hourly as well, but only when we first post. Like when we first post something for the first hour, I try to see, is it doing well? Because usually that's telling. Because if it does really well within the first hour, you should probably create more of that kind of content, because it's harder to get that push. But again, going back to what Deepica said, the algorithm's changing so much that now even Instagram lets your reels will go viral weeks later, which is strange because it was never like that before. So it's great to monitor, it's great to see what's doing well, what's not doing well, but you never know what didn't do well before and might do well in the future. So read the data, but trust your gut and keep experimenting.
Back to what you said about going inward, my therapist told me not to look every hour.
Probably good advice.
My mental health can't handle
That's
it.
probably very good advice. I should stop, but I'm crazy.
Do we have another question?
First of all, let me say I love seeing two strong women on the stage. I've been following you guys for over 10 years, so I'm a baby millennial, so I've literally been following your journey since I've been in high school and college. So shout out to you guys. Round of applause, shall we?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
But kind of speaking from that experience, I was in the first round of Instagram and seeing how that content took off. Now we have AI, the beast that it is, or the boon that it is. We have obviously seen how it's helpful for data, but with content creation, some people are creating AI models, some people are leaning into AI and teaching it how to create content that mimics their page. What is your thoughts on AI within the beauty space, and is there any way to make AI authentic?
I mean, I personally love AI. I'm experimenting 24/7 on ChatGPT, on Gamma AI, on like presentations, images. Like I do it in my free time. I just make images. I don't really use them too much right now, but I do think regardless of how we feel about it, it is the future, and it's only going to become more and more important. It's kind of like social media. Like everybody tried to resist social media being important from like a marketing perspective, et cetera, but it's reality. It's never going to change. So AI, it's the very beginning. And we all need to accept that and embrace it and just try to get as familiar with all of the different AIs out there as you can, because it will be, a huge advantage for those who are ahead versus those who are resisting. It's just, it is what it is. And yes, it might make it easier to copy artists and things like that, which honestly sucks, but it's the reality, so you just have to embrace it. The sooner you embrace it, the better you're going to be off.
Yeah, you got to get on board. I'm encouraging my entire team to experiment with it all the time. Work smart, not hard.
Can teach you a lot. I love Gamma AI. I'm not affiliated, but if you guys want to check it out, you can make really cool presentations in like 10 seconds. It's unreal. And sometimes I do it on myself on the brand just to see what it's going to come up with, and it's just very interesting.
Thanks for following us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. One more question. Elvis in the back.
Hi, Deepica. I know we've spoken before, but I always have multiple questions for you. Yeah,
it's gonna be a
obviously
long
you're
one.
like a wealth of knowledge. But my question is, you obviously started 10 years ago, and you started off as an influencer, and you've built such an amazing brand, right? And I would argue that it is most likely because at that point in time, social media hasn't been very radicalized as it is now, and it hasn't been as saturated as it is right now. And also because there hasn't been many policies that have been put in place as it is right now, right? So how do you think that people who are sort of trying to turn their personal brands into building, their personal influence into building brands and communities, how do you think they can do that at this point in time where, again, social media has been radicalized and there are like policies that are put in place almost every time to make you very unsure of that kind of future?
Ooh, magical question. Yeah, I think what Mona said earlier still speaks to me that like you're still uniquely you. And so the idea that today it's a saturated market, which it very much is, still doesn't mean that, there's people every day building brands and growing and going viral out of nowhere. It's still like, yes, it is more saturated, but the opportunity to go viral is higher. With the TikTok world that exists now, like my video with 10 million views on YouTube 10 years ago, now can happen on TikTok every second, honestly. So I always tell people, like, the time is now, but you have to be yourself. Like, you gotta be uniquely you, goofy, silly, whatever that is, because someone else already exists. Kind of corny, but it's the truth.
Love it.
I love that.
All right, well, that's a wrap. Thank you guys so much for this awesome conversation.